She looked me straight in the eye and said words that shattered me. "You'll never see the kids again." Those kids. My grandbabies. My whole world. I walked out of her house that day feeling like the ground had vanished beneath my feet. But life has a funny way of turning the tables, because not only did I see my grandchildren again, now my daughter-in-law calls me every single day. Stay with me, because this is the story of how heartbreak turned into something I never expected. I'll never forget that afternoon. The sun was bright, children's laughter spilled from the backyard, and I thought I was walking into a warm family visit. I had baked cookies, the kind my grandkids loved, with extra chocolate chips just for them. But the moment my daughter-in-law opened the door, her face was like stone. No smile, no warmth, just tension I could feel before she even spoke. She didn't invite me in. She didn't even glance at the cookies in my hands. She folded her arms and said flat and sharp, "You'll never see the kids again." At first, I thought I misheard. My ears rang, my heart pounded. "What?" I whispered, clutching the container tighter. She repeated it, colder this time. "You're not welcome here anymore. You won't be around my children." I stood frozen, the words slicing through me like ice. Those children weren't just her kids. They were my grandchildren. My joy. My reason for keeping going some days. I had rocked them to sleep, kissed scraped knees, told them stories about family history so they'd know where they came from. And now, with one sentence, she was ripping them away from me. I tried to speak, my voice trembling. "Please." "What did I do?" She turned her eyes away. "You interfere too much. You question me. You make me feel judged. I won't allow that around my kids." Interfere? Judged? I felt my chest tighten. All I had ever done was try to help. I cooked meals, babysat when asked, even slipped money into their mailbox when I knew bills were piling up. I thought I was supporting, not smothering. But she saw it differently. The door didn't slam, not physically, but the way she turned and walked back inside, leaving me standing there, clutching cookies that suddenly felt so heavy. That silence was louder than any slam could have been. I walked back to my car in a haze. The laughter of my grandchildren drifted through the backyard fence, stabbing at me with every giggle. They didn't even know their grandma was just a few feet away, being told she'd never see them again. Driving home, tears blurred the road. My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I asked myself over and over, am I really such a bad mother-in-law? Did I overstep that much? When I got home, I sat at my kitchen table, the cookies untouched. I stared at the family photos on the wall. My son's wedding day, me smiling beside my new daughter-in-law, full of hope. Pictures of the kids as toddlers, sticky fingers reaching for my hand. And now, silence. That night, I didn't sleep. I replayed every conversation I'd had with her, every visit. Maybe I had offered advice too freely. Maybe I had overstepped without realizing. But did that mean I should be cut out completely? I whispered into the dark. "They're my grandbabies. How can she take them from me?" My heart broke, but somewhere in the ache, a small ember of determination began to burn. I didn't know how, I didn't know when, but I wasn't going to let those words be the end of my story with them. Because love like mine doesn't disappear just because someone shuts a door. The days that followed felt endless. I would wake up in the morning, make a cup of coffee, and for a brief moment forget. Then the memory would slam into me again. The look on her face, the finality in her voice. "You'll never see the kids again." The house felt emptier than ever. Their toys, once scattered across my living room, were neatly tucked away in a corner. The silence pressed against me, and I found myself longing for the sound of little feet running down the hall, the laughter that used to echo off the walls. I tried to fill my days. I went for walks, baked bread, even joined a book club at the library, but nothing replaced the ache of missing them. Every child I saw at the park, every small hand clutching a parent's, was a reminder of what had been taken from me. One evening, I sat in my chair by the window and spotted a car slowing down in front of my house. My heart leapt, thinking maybe, just maybe, they had come, but it was just a stranger passing by. The disappointment hit me like a punch. I thought about calling my son, pleading my case, but what would I say? Would he defend me, or would he stand by his wife? The fear of hearing his silence on the other end of the line kept me from dialing. Instead, I wrote letters, not to send, just to pour out the words stuck in my chest. Letters to my grandchildren, telling them stories of when they were small, how my oldest once insisted on wearing superhero pajamas to church, how the youngest would fall asleep clutching my finger. I sealed each letter in an envelope and tucked them away in a drawer, praying one day they might read them. And no, Grandma never stopped loving them. Nights were the hardest. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every detail of that day at the door. The way she crossed her arms, the way her voice didn't shake. She meant it. She truly wanted me gone from their lives. And yet, I couldn't bring myself to hate her. Underneath the anger and pain, I knew she was stressed, overwhelmed, trying to be the perfect mother. Maybe my presence felt like pressure she couldn't handle. I told myself maybe one day she'll see my love for what it is, not interference, but devotion. Still, doubt gnawed at me. Was I too opinionated? Did I give advice when it wasn't asked for? Did my eagerness to help come across as control? Weeks passed. Birthdays came and went. I left gifts on their porch, carefully wrapped with cards filled with love. Sometimes the packages disappeared, sometimes they didn't. I never knew if the children even saw them. The loneliness was suffocating. I'd stand in the kitchen and catch myself setting extra plates, forgetting there was no one coming. I'd glance at the clock around the time school let out, imagining the kids bursting through my door, backpacks swinging. Then the reality would hit. I wasn't part of their after school anymore. But through the tears, a quiet resolve grew inside me. I promised myself that if the chance ever came, I would not let bitterness rule me. I would not let anger poison the love I had for my grandchildren, or even for my daughter-in-law. Because love, real love, is patient. It waits even in silence. It endures, even when doors are closed. And though my heart ached with every passing day, I held on to hope. Somehow, some way, the story wasn't over. It was a rainy Thursday when the phone rang. I almost didn't answer. I had grown used to silence, to days and weeks without hearing from them. The sound startled me, sharp against the quiet of the house. When I picked up, my heart nearly stopped. It was her, my daughter-in-law, the same woman who had stood in the doorway and told me I'd never see my grandchildren again. Her voice was shaky, softer than I remembered. "Mom, I need help." For a moment, I didn't trust my ears. I thought maybe it was a cruel trick of my imagination, but no, it was real. She was asking. She explained quickly, her words tumbling out like she'd been holding them in too long. My son was away on a work trip. The kids were both sick, fevers climbing higher than she could handle. She sounded exhausted, scared, on the edge of tears. "I don't know what to do," she admitted. "I can't manage this alone. Can you come?" I didn't hesitate, not even for a second. All the hurt, all the silence, all the nights I had cried into my pillow, none of it mattered in that moment. What mattered were those children, and the woman who, despite everything, was reaching out in desperation. "I'll be right there," I said, grabbing my coat. When I arrived, the sight broke my heart. The kids were curled on the couch, flushed and shivering. My daughter-in-law looked pale, her hair messy, dark circles under her eyes. She glanced at me, almost ashamed, but relief flooded her face the moment I stepped inside. Without a word, I set to work. I made soup, fetched cool towels for their foreheads, measured out medicine. My hands moved with a steadiness that came from years of mothering, of knowing exactly what to do in times of crisis. And slowly the children began to settle. Their fevers eased, their little bodies relaxed. My daughter-in-law sat at the edge of the couch, watching in silence as I worked. Finally, she whispered, "Thank you." It was a small word, but it carried a weight I could feel deep in my bones. That night, after the children were tucked into bed, she and I sat across from each other at the kitchen table. The tension that had once filled the air between us seemed thinner, less sharp. She spoke quietly, almost to herself. "I didn't realize how much I needed you. I thought I could handle everything. I thought keeping control meant pushing you away. But tonight, I see I was wrong." Tears welled in my eyes, but I stayed calm. "I've only ever wanted to help," I said softly. "Not to replace you, not to overstep, just to love them, to love all of you." She looked down at her hands, twisting them nervously. "I know. I felt judged." "I thought you saw me as failing." I shook my head. "I saw you as overwhelmed, and I wanted to carry some of the weight." For the first time, her eyes met mine without defensiveness, without anger. Just honesty, and maybe a touch of regret. In that moment, the wall that had stood between us began to crumble. By the time I left the next morning, she hugged me at the door. It was awkward, hesitant, but real. And as I walked to my car, the words echoed in my mind. "I need help." Those 3 words had cracked open a door I thought was sealed forever. And though it was only a beginning, I knew the story was turning. After that night, things didn't transform overnight, but the ice had cracked. For the first time in months, my phone rang with her name on the screen. Not once, not by accident, but intentionally. She asked how the children could recover faster, what home remedies I used when my son was little, if I could stop by again to help with meals. At first, I was cautious. I didn't want to get my hopes up only to be shut out again. But each time she called, her voice carried less tension, less pride, and more warmth. Slowly, I allowed myself to believe this wasn't temporary. It was a door reopening. One afternoon, I arrived to find her waiting with a cup of tea already made for me. She smiled nervously. "I figured you could use this before we get started." It was such a simple gesture, but my heart swelled. That small act told me she no longer saw me as the enemy. We began spending more time together, not just with the kids, but in quiet moments between chores. As I folded laundry or chopped vegetables, she lingered nearby, asking questions about raising children, about marriage, about life. At first, her questions felt cautious, like she was testing the waters, but over time they grew genuine. "How did you handle tantrums when my husband was little? How did you keep your patience when money was tight?" And I answered honestly, not to boast, not to preach, but to share. For the first time, she seemed to see me not as competition, not as interference, but as a source of wisdom. One evening, while the children were asleep, we sat at the kitchen table in the soft glow of a lamp. She sighed heavily, her hands wrapped around her mug. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice trembling. I braced myself, not sure what was coming. She looked straight at me. "I was wrong. I shouldn't have shut you out. I was overwhelmed, insecure, and I thought pushing you away would give me control. But it only left me alone, and it hurt you, more than I ever admitted." Tears burned my eyes, but I stayed quiet, letting her speak. She continued, "When I told you that you'd never see the kids again, I didn't realize how cruel it sounded. I just wanted space. But I see now I wasn't protecting them. I was punishing you, and I'm sorry." For a long moment, we sat in silence, just two women who loved the same family, both of us scarred by words we couldn't take back. Finally, I reached across the table and took her hand. "I forgive you," I whispered. "I know how hard motherhood can be. I've been there. And I've only ever wanted to make it easier for you?" She nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. In that moment, the tension that had once defined our relationship melted away. The next day, she called me not out of desperation, but simply to talk. She told me about her day, about the kids' funny moments, about her worries and joys, and from then on, the calls didn't stop. Day by day, she began including me in the family again, not as an outsider peeking through a closed door, but as a grandmother, a mother-in-law, and most importantly, as part of their circle of trust. And with each call, each invitation, each smile, I felt the wound in my heart slowly healing. It still amazes me how quickly life can turn. Not long ago, I was standing at her doorstep, being told I would never see my grandchildren again. Now my phone lights up with her name every single day. At first, I thought the calls would stop once the kids recovered, once the crisis passed. But they didn't. They kept coming, morning check-ins, afternoon questions, evening chats about how the children were doing. Sometimes she'd ask for advice. Other times, she just wanted someone to listen. One morning, she called while I was watering the garden. "Mom," she said, her voice lighter than I'd ever heard it, "Emma has a school project. Can you help her with it? She really wants Grandma's touch." My heart swelled. Just months ago, I was erased from their lives. Now my granddaughter wanted my help. Soon it became routine. I'd help with homework over video calls, read bedtime stories when my son worked late, or simply chat while she cooked dinner. And each time I realized something important. She no longer called me out of obligation or desperation. She called because she wanted me there. One evening, after the kids were asleep, she phoned just to talk. No emergencies, no questions, just talk. She told me about her work, her stress, her dreams. "I never thought I'd say this," she admitted with a laugh. "But you're the person I feel safest talking to." I sat there holding the phone, tears streaming down my face. To go from being shut out completely to being the one she leaned on, it was nothing short of a miracle. My son noticed the change too. One weekend, he wrapped his arm around me and said softly, Mom, thank you for being patient. Thank you for not giving up on us." And I realized then that patience had been my greatest ally. I could have lashed out in anger, demanded my rights as a grandmother, created deeper divisions. But instead I chose to wait, to love from a distance, to let time and need soften her heart. And it worked. Not overnight, not without pain, but it worked. Now when the phone rings, I don't flinch. I smile. I know it's her reaching out not to push me away, but to draw me closer. I've gone from being told I'd never see the kids again to being woven back into their daily lives. The best part? The children don't see the conflict anymore. To them, Grandma has always been there. They call me with their little triumphs. "Grandma, I got an A." And their small heartbreaks. "Grandma, my friend wouldn't share." And I'm there for it all, like I always wanted to be. One night, after a long call about nothing and everything, my daughter-in-law said softly, "I don't know what I'd do without you." I closed my eyes, letting the words wash over me. They were the exact opposite of the sentence that had once shattered me. And in that moment, I knew the truth. Sometimes the people who hurt us the most can also become the ones who lean on us the most, if we allow forgiveness and patience to do their quiet work. Today, my daughter in law doesn't see me as a burden or as someone to keep at arm's length. She sees me as a partner, a mother, and above all, a grandmother who loves without limits. From being shut out to being called every single day, our story proves that patience, love, and forgiveness can heal even the deepest wounds. If you've ever been told you don't belong or that your place in the family no longer matters, remember this. Love has a way of finding its way back. Sometimes it takes time, sometimes it takes pain, but it always finds a door. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true stories of family, forgiveness, and second chances.